All right, we're recording. Cool. Sorry, so we can keep going with that. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about like what you do. I know it's strength and conditioning based, right? And then I kind of know what happened a bit with the Jersey club and everything. So kind of wanted to hear your thoughts about it or like where you're at with that and kind
Yeah,
of what you're doing now and everything.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that came as a bit of a surprise. So I suppose, had been told that the club was going from strength to strength, that financially we were in a good spot. That was my impression anyway, that we were in a good place and the club was going to continue to progress like in the coming years, and then to just sort of be told or get a text message on the day, be taken in, and everybody loses their jobs instantly was a bit of a shock. But yeah, I suppose an initial period of what am we going to do now kind of thing,
Hmm.
and yeah, what's the best next step, and I suppose like reflecting on my own strengths, weaknesses. One thing I hadn't done in years gone by that uh, was sort of like a nagging thing in the back of my head was I hadn't done an awful lot of going out and seeing different people's environments. So I suppose just dedicate some time to working on that, and it's definitely been fruitful so far. So I went out to Australia, then Japan, currently in England, and then I'll go to the USA after. So
Oh,
um,
nice.
just
Where are you going in
actually
the US?
all over really. So I plan to spend more time in the East Coast, and I think New York, Philadelphia, Chicago.
Hmm.
I'll spend a bit of time down in Atlanta, and if I can get in, it really depends on where I suppose people will let me in, and that I know different kind of environments have, I suppose, different mindsets around whether they allow strangers in. I suppose so. Yeah, pretty much if I can get an in to different spots and get my eyes on different sports, like the majority of what I've looked at now this last couple of months has been rugby based.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I think it would be beneficial to me to see some different things again, like even to open up the avenue for myself down the line to work in a sport that isn't just rugby. Like I didn't grow up playing rugby. I don't come from kind of a rugby background. That was just where placements and internships and stuff led me towards. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm definitely
So
not.
so more like strength and conditioning based for you, more of like just like functional fitness, that kind of side of things, or like where's your
Um,
passion kind of in that?
I do. I really enjoy team sports. I enjoy the whole kind of atmosphere. I think like rugby's a great place to work in that very like tight group, very lively. Like there's
Yeah.
value placed on strength and conditioning in most clubs that I've seen. So I suppose there's a sense of satisfaction in your work because you can see that you are valued and you are contributing to the result. Whereas I think in other sports you're sort of just you're there as like a compulsory thing, but you don't have much input. Um, so yeah,
Right.
like I enjoy I enjoy the theory, the interaction, all of the principles and systems probably more than I enjoy any specific sport. Like I wouldn't be one for actually sitting and watching a lot of sport,
Uh-huh.
which for better or for worse, I don't know. But and yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a weird thing. I prefer reading about the science behind sport than I do actually watching it. So um,
Gotcha. Cool.
yeah, but I suppose like I've tried to keep some sort of general reading in the background, like throughout my career, and see what I can pull from other kind of disciplines.
Hmm.
So whenever I saw like your profile popping up on LinkedIn, I suppose like my head goes to that's quite interesting and wonder is there anything there that is applicable to what we do, because if we can there might be some practice that violates some principle that really isn't appropriate that we can improve by improving our knowledge of the principles of neurofeedback.
Hmm.
Um, Particularly like so much of we do, there are there's a lot going on around how much does this training system, how much does this exercise transfer across to skill execution on field. So
Right.
there's a lot of hypothesizing, a lot of debate around skill learning, skill acquisition, skill transfer, without probably that comprehensive an understanding of the actual underlying processes of that. So yeah, I think the next step is probably looking at different fields and understanding those in a little bit more depth, and seeing if we can improve what we do, boots on the ground.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, do you have any questions for me to kind of start things out? Or I guess the way to start things out too is like, do you know much about neurofeedback, or what do you know about it?
Yeah, not in an explanatory sense. Like I couldn't, if someone asked me to do a lecture on it, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But there are things
Uh-huh.
that, when you say neurofeedback, there are practices that are implemented currently in strength and conditioning and rehab that I would describe as, oh, that's what that is. Like say like a metronome in running gait, and how different tempos alter the cadence of running. Like that's where my head goes to in terms of,
Oh yeah.
again, like I might be way off the mark there. So I suppose like what I was hoping for from yourself is pretty much like a description of what is it and where do you see it being applicable in like a sports setting. Are
Yeah.
there any things that you see being done as like popular practices in sport that you're like, they're not on the mark there, they're actually, they don't understand this principle and they can improve by doing X, Y, Z?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I can dive right into that if you'd like to. So, um, starting things out, neurofeedback has been used before a lot with professional athletes, different teams and things like that. So there is a bit of history with it. I think like the US ski Olympic team used neurofeedback to help win a couple gold medals. I know there's some American football players like Tom Brady and Kirk Cousins, some other people like that who've used it and said it's been pretty beneficial for their gameplay, especially with being able to stay cool under pressure. Kind of those like high pressure, high tense situations, being able to like stay in that flow state, stay in that zone, and be able to execute the way they need to. Another team was like I think it's 2006 Italian soccer team won the World Cup that year, and they attributed neurofeedback to a lot of what their successes with how they played and being able to stay in the game and everything like that too. So there's a bit of history behind it. It's been around since the 70s, so there's been quite a bit of research done with it. A lot of, there's kind of this big community around it, but it's not in that mainstream point of view yet, just because it's a bit alternative, especially compared to like medicine or other kinds of factors that insurance companies or big pharma wants to like really stay committed to. But neurofeedback is a great alternative to medications, and I think it's a great supplement to kind of what we're talking about, how it's applied with sport and being able to use it to help the athlete's kind of mental game. Now, I know like a lot of clubs, and probably in the UK and Australia too, probably more than the US, have like sports psychologists that are like part of the club, and somebody that people can talk to, or if they're just like struggling with their game or anything there. And neurofeedback, I think, would be a great supplement to that, a great addition to having somebody to talk to, because it really helps kind of open the gates with everything going on neurologically, and they're creating better connectivity, increasing focus and attention, being able to control your mood a little bit easier, and that kind of arousal state that you're in. So if we're like really, really psyched up and like fired up and like excited, how do we like calm it down, feel relaxed, and like be able to make this kick or whatever, kind of how that kind of works. Um, that's kind of a general view of neurofeedback in general, and I can get kind of detailed into like how it works and exactly what it's doing. But do you have any questions there or anything I can elaborate on so far?
Yeah, I suppose like just to get a picture of what that actually looks like. I think it's an area that I've seen spoken about in a few different environments where they are looking at regulating arousal level.
Hmm.
The current sort of practice in that is breath work and I suppose
Yep.
long exhales. Is the process that you have something that is a little bit more objective than that? provides a bit more detailed information, or I suppose what, like whenever you say neurofeedback, what is the feedback that is being given?
Yes. So kind of what you're describing a bit is biofeedback. So for instance, that's another type of practice where like we'd hook you up to an EKG monitor. You're looking at your heart rate, you're seeing like how things are going, and you're like, okay, take a couple of deep breaths, try to lower that heart rate down to this level. And the feedback is the screen you're looking at being saying like, oh, okay, I know where my heart rate is, and I'm trying to lower that based on my breath work or these other physiological things, right? So neurofeedback is a form of biofeedback where we're just working with the electrical activity in the brain, giving it different rewards to make it behave differently. So I'll get into a bit of the details here. So how I start things out is I start out with a brain map for somebody. It's a QEEG brain map, quantitative electroencephalogram, essentially recording all the electrical activity on the brain. There's different brain waves. You've probably heard of them before, like delta, theta, alpha. There's betas, there's gammas as well. So these different kinds of brain waves we can monitor and see where the prevalence are of these brain waves in different parts of the brain, which mean different things. So essentially I can see like, okay, you have a lot of alpha, let's say, in this part of your brain, but not a lot in this part of your brain. We want to try to balance that out to create more flexibility for you, so you're able to control these arousal states a bit easier instead of being controlled by these brain waves and how you're going to operate and be personally, socially, emotionally, and then bringing that into game time, like how you can change that level and be where you need to be able to operate in the way you need to operate. Once we do have that map, kind of seeing where all those brainwaves are, I find out for that individual person, okay, like you have a lot of alpha. Let's try to turn that down a little bit, try to make things more flexible, a little bit more evened out between the brainwaves, if you will. So we have more accessibility to access those other brainwaves in these different parts of the brain. Now, what training really looks like, there's a few different types of neurofeedback training. Some have specific programs that are built into their systems. Some are a little bit more subconscious, what I work with. Essentially, I hook people up with electrodes to the machine. The machine is reading that electrical activity. And let's just keep working with alpha at this. If somebody's alpha, let's say it's up here at, let's just give it a random number at like a 12. And I want to turn it down, let's say, just like make it work down a little bit more. I set the threshold on my computer to say, all right, let's turn alpha down to 6. And every time that brainwave hits that 6, they hear reward sounds in their headphones. And the brain likes these kind of random stimulus that comes in. It's kind of like a cookie for the brain. It's like, oh, I want to keep doing that. I want to keep doing that. So over time and consistency, usually some people do it pretty fast. They wreck through it in about a couple weeks, but how I've been trained to do it and how I like to do it is this kind of 2 to 3 month program where someone's coming in 2 to 3 times a week, training those brainwaves to operate on those different levels. And through that different time and consistency, those brainwaves start to operate at that different level, creating different feelings for people, different behaviors, and obviously like increasing attention and focus, ability to sleep better, other kinds of mental health kind of issues people struggle with. Maybe somebody's feeling anxious or like they have that anxiety kind of already built into their system, and this will help reduce that, get them more comfortable and feel more themselves. Depression stuff also really prevalent with that as well, really helpful with working with those different brainwaves to help somebody feel a lot better from a depressed state. And I know that's kind of being worked on a bit in the sport community as well, as just that kind of stigma around mental health and being able to talk about these things, not have to tough it out and be the tough guy and, you know, just put your head down and work. Obviously that's part of it. And you've got to be strong and be tough to play, you know, these high intense sports, especially these really physical ones. But there's a piece of it too, where I think there's a line, a midline to find where you can be tough, but you can also like be honest and be authentic in that emotional expression and be yourself and ultimately be a better athlete and better performer in that way because you're being more authentic to yourself.
Yeah.
So lots of explanation there. I know that was a lot of info, but you know, let me know.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions off the back of that. I suppose when someone is hooked up and they're getting this reward,
Hmm.
whenever say that 12 goes down to a 6, is that accompanied by like change in visceral sensation in that individual? Is it accompanied by uh, is it followed by a change in thought, or is it preceded by a change in thought that then causes a change in wave? Like what does the individual feel to get it down to that level? Like what do they begin to associate
Like,
with grace?
yeah, so let me make sure I have your question right. So are they necessarily thinking about something specific or like trying to get into a certain state to create a certain brainwave or increase or decrease that wave in that level? Is that kind of what you're
Yes,
asking?
say
Like,
for example,
mhm.
if they're at a 12 and ideally they're at a 6, is it for them to successfully bring that down? Is that preceded by a thought? Is it them doing something on a biological level in terms of breath, or is it something
Mhm.
that is a level of control over those brain waves that can only be taught with this neurofeedback, and it isn't tied to necessarily like a system of thought or physiology? Is there something that is a little bit untouched that
Yeah,
they then learn?
I think yeah, I'll have to do a bit of explanation. I think I can answer this question for you though. So how I do neurofeedback, the system that I use, it's almost completely unconscious on that subconscious level. So they're not necessarily having to think about, okay, I need to relax or I need to think about clouds or floating river or something meditative or something calm to make that brainwave do that. It's going to do it automatically, especially with the reward system, how it works. It's just going to keep operating to push that brainwave on that level. And eventually people are like, oh, like I feel a bit calmer. Or I feel a little bit more relaxed in this. I can go to sleep a little bit better. There are other types of training specifically focused on that, saying like, okay, we want you to think about nothing. And when you hear this sound, that means you're making that brainwave at that right way. And they continue to try to get into that state with their mind per se. Um, there's a lot of different ways to do neurofeedback, but how I do it, how the systems I've used and how I've learned to do it is that kind of subconscious level where they don't even necessarily have to be thinking a certain way or to get into a certain mode. The machine's going to do all the work for them, and they just kind of get to sit there, have a bit of stimulus just to keep them focused, keep them attentive. So like maybe something they're reading, maybe a show they're watching, something like that. Doesn't necessarily have to be so training focused. It can be a little bit more laid back, not really the term I want to use, but they kind of get to take a back seat and let their brain do all the work with the machine instead of having to be so consciously giving that conscious effort to make these things happen. Does that
So
answer that
then,
question?
yeah. So longitudinally, then, if the individual doesn't develop like a verbal understanding or an understanding of a process of I did X and got Y result, how
Hmm.
then does it become like applicable on field? Like how do they get to a stage where they recognize my alpha is too high and I do this process to bring themselves down?
Right. So that is more of like the conversations that me as the technician, me as the person working on them would have with them, saying like, how did you feel in practice the last week? Were you able to kind of like drop down into that flow state a little bit easier, not really thinking about what you have to do and just kind of letting your body move? Um, or maybe were you a little bit more stressed out and you're overthinking things, or you're distressed about who's watching you or what your coach thinks or what your other players think, things like that. So that's kind of where the counseling bit of it kind of comes into play, where we're able to like really formulate what these feelings actually feel like and connect those to those brain waves so that someone can say like, oh, okay, I'm over aroused right now. I need to like relax, use that breath work or something of that sort to get into this alpha state a bit easier and be able to play the way I want to play. Um, yeah, so that's what I would say
Mm,
there. It's kind of the
that's
conversational piece with that person, that sports psychologist, that counselor person, someone like that who knows kind of the intricacies of sport and what they're doing, as well as kind of that mental health aspect of it, to be able to connect those two and make them more of an authentic player.
Yeah, I see. Because like I had heard that around a sort of counseling setting of people saying if you can label a feeling, that then is the initial step to addressing it. But I'd imagine, like, correct me if I'm wrong, that adds a level of objectivity to a feeling or something that is askew, as
Right.
opposed to something way off and they just feel aroused and they're like, I'm angry or I'm
Yeah, like,
anxious.
oh,
Or
I'm jacked up here, and it's like, no, actually you're anxious, and that's anxiety. And so once we've addressed that, we can start to work that down and play with it in this kind of way where you have more control over it. The nice thing about neurofeedback is it does it all on its own. Your brain is like very intuitive with how it wants to work and how we make the program work with that person's brain to be able to they don't even really have to think about it. But I think that kind of next level, that next step up is that, assigning that verbiage, that language to these different feelings and being able to differentiate them and work with it as well and have more sense of control over it.
yeah, I think I'd seen whenever you were saying around the alpha and delta, is it Joe Dispenza had written that?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's been pretty big into it. I've had quite a few people message me about him, being like, "Oh, have you seen his stuff? Like, you see what he's doing?" That's like right on the money with the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So
yeah, because I read a couple of his books and they were that was, I suppose, my introduction to the terminology there around neurofeedback. But again, like I suppose I didn't put two and two together and see any sort of applicability to sports. But yeah, that's really interesting. Do you see like is there a profile or commonality around the like the wave profiles of individuals in terms of sort of outliers of very successful people in sport? Are there
yeah.
trends
Mhm.
towards activity in certain directions?
Yeah, I would say so, definitely. I would say a lot of that kind of beta brainwave that I mentioned before, that's more of like your action performance, like more little bit higher arousal type brainwave, where somebody's going to be more active, they're going to be more in touch with their body, they're going to feel more, their brain's going to like to use that brainwave more. So using that like very switched on feeling, that very focused in that flow state kind of sense. I would also say that alpha is very important with that as well, because that's where you kind of like drop into that flow state a little bit more, almost in a meditative kind of sense, but still being active and keeping things cool. So kind of how I would imagine like a fly half to operate. Somebody who's, seeing the field a little bit more has to be a little bit more cerebral with their play, as opposed to, you know, flanker just running around hitting people or whatever, something like that. Um, yeah, so that's what I would say there too. And there's definitely those profiles for anxiety or for depression, those kinds of mental health kind of labels that get assigned to people too. Those have certain kind of profiles of brainwaves and what that will kind of look like. Because if somebody has a bunch of high beta, so that's kind of our fight or flight response or anxiety, they're going to be a little bit more tight, a little bit more wound up in that, versus being able to like be more calm and relaxed and just play the game that they want to play, instead of being like wrapped up in other things or in their head about things, or maybe their body's feeling tight and that leads to injury or some kind of tension problem, something they can't sleep well. So as you know, strength and conditioning, like sleep and recovery, that's a huge portion of it. And if somebody's not able to get that sleep, or they're just not able to have restful sleep in that matter, then that's going to affect their play and their performance too.
And is there I suppose, is there a genetic component to people's profiles? Is that sort of, is
I
there
would.
hereditary to
That's a great question.
yeah,
Yeah,
the profile and the direction? Like am I more likely to have high alpha because my dad did? Is it more of a environmental influence, or is it genetic?
I would say that that's such a great question, because I would really say that it's a lot of 50-50. Part of it is, what you're kind of given, what your parents kind of gave to you, and how maybe their brains like to operate, how your brain likes to operate. There's also the chemical components of that and the genetics portion of that too. The other piece of it, the environmental factor, is kind of like what you train when you're a kid or when you're young. Like, do you like to sit and read and just be quiet, or do something a little more of that cerebral thing, or do you like to be outside and like running around and you're more hyperactive or something like that too? Or so I would say it's a bit of both in how you like to train that brainwave, and how through your life you've built this kind of profile for yourself. But there's also that other half that is that kind of genetic component too. So in short, I'd say 50-50 with that.
And I suppose like one of the things that I would hear spoken about in sport is like an arousal level, and there's that kind of inverted U graph for an individual. Is that a simplification of what is actually, I suppose, multiple waves? Like, is it not necessarily just one level of arousal? You might be too high in alpha and not high enough in beta. Is it I suppose how are those different types of waves brought together to get someone to an optimal level?
Yeah, so I think I have your question here. So all those brainwaves, we're making all those different brainwaves at the same time in all these different parts of our brain, where there's more prevalence of some of those waves in certain areas that will dictate kind of how somebody's personality, their demeanor, their attitude is kind of structured. And with neurofeedback, kind of the goal is to create more flexibility between those brainwaves, so you're able to pick which one you want to work and get into that state a little bit easier, as opposed to not really knowing what's going on and just kind of running with it. Does that answer your question, or was I off the ball a little bit there?
I suppose most of that talk around arousal would come like pre-game, and how does an individual leave the changing room at the appropriate state of being sort of excited enough to go out and perform, but not so far off the edge that they're just scattered and over aggressive. Is that a case of balance between those waves? Like, say for example, you might be too low in your alpha and too high in your beta.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
single like curve of just one value called arousal is actually too simplistic.
Yeah, I would say so, because it's not necessarily like, oh, they're just all high beta here, and that's like the only reason they're all jacked up. There's other components to that as well, and being able to change and fluctuate that arousal state is that goal of neurofeedback, is to be able to feel and see where you're at, and then be able to bring it down or bring it up depending on where you need to be able to perform.
And you mean that like within game?
Yeah, within game, like before the game, definitely. Like I think both. So like before the game, kind of how you're setting yourself up, how that mentality, how that mindset is kind of settling into it, what you're kind of thinking about, what you're preparing for. And then obviously during game, you have to switch things up quite a bit, right? If something's working, maybe you have to change that tactic, that mindset. Maybe you need to get fired up. Maybe you need to like build that power. Maybe we're in the red line in that defensive stand right on the goal line, and we need to, I don't need to be calm. I don't need to be relaxed there. I need to be powerful. I need to be aggressive. I need to like make these things happen, as opposed to maybe I need to calm down and make this kick and lower that arousal level and be able to make that kind of more skill based action.
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose like where my head goes to is the setting we had in Jersey, where like we were quite limited in terms of budget. So say like wouldn't necessarily have been able to get someone in, like it was a small island just off the coast of France. People to and from it was quite tricky. So is there, in the absence of the machinery, what can be done in like I suppose, like an affordable or cheap
Yeah.
sense? Is there like app-based support? Are there like affordable bits of kit that can provide that feedback, I suppose, just in terms of applicability for different S&Cs and different environments? What
Yeah,
is the story there?
absolutely. And that's one of the kind of funny things about neurofeedback too, is there's like a whole range of the different kinds of equipment and intensity that you can do it at. So there's like that really high end equipment. You want somebody who probably knows all the intricacies of that equipment and is able to do that. That's going to be more expensive with things. There's also at home equipment that people can use where they just say like, okay, I want to like train alpha. They put this little headset on, they watch a little video or have that music with that feedback or whatever, and they can train it that way. I would say it's not necessarily as effective as that kind of higher end stuff, but still very effective and applicable for those athletes, especially if they don't have the resources or means to get to that like high technical level. Those other pieces of equipment are equally helpful with that too. A couple of other things that are really helpful with being able to be consciously focused on your brain waves and kind of do some training on your own without equipment. I would say meditation is one. Meditation is going to increase that alpha. So essentially, being able to be more process oriented, think about the steps, think about the different analyses of things, the questions, the answers, the different routes you want to take, whatnot, but also dropping into that calm flow state and that low arousal where you're still awake and focused, but not necessarily like all tight and tense, right? Another one is binaural beats. If you've heard of those before, they're different kind of tones or music that are set to different wavelengths that kind of match those brain wavelengths that I was talking about too. So if you're like, I want to get up and go here, I need to like wake up and get some energy. Maybe you put on some beta binaural beats, and that's going to increase those beta waves, which inadvertently is going to create more arousal for you, make you a little bit more awake, make you a little bit more active and ready to work. So those meditation and those binaural beats, I would say, are kind of two other ways that people can work their brain waves without necessarily doing neurofeedback.
Yeah, see, it's cool. And in terms of the meditation and binaural beats, like it's something that we would have integrated a little bit of. It's something that I've seen done in some sports teams, but I don't think at the moment, again, a bit of a generalization, but speaking for myself, I suppose, to
Uh-huh.
be able to systematize that to apply like the appropriate stimulus at the right time, in the sense of, we would say, right, we're going to do meditation, but is the form of meditation appropriate in terms of the direction that I'm trying to bring someone? Am I applying like a specific stimulus where someone is lacking? And the same with the binaural beats.
Uh-huh.
So we have some sort of framework there for which direction and which stimulus we actually need to apply at different times would be helpful. Like I think we would have done briefly, we called it like non-sleep deep rest,
Uh-huh.
like a 20-minute meditation kind of option in the day. And again, we sort of had questions of, are we doing the right thing there? Are we bringing people in the right direction for where we need them for the remainder of the day?
Uh-huh.
Do they have enough time to bring themselves back up off the back of that? So yeah, I think it's something that's starting to be integrated now, but I don't know if there's a great deal of understanding in terms of, are we doing it in a sensible manner? So
Yeah,
yeah, I
I
don't know.
totally get that. And I've thought about that a bit too. Like just personally, because I play rugby too. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. I've been playing for like 12 years or so. So I'm used to that. I played other sports throughout my life, and I've thought about using it specifically for sport, and thinking like, what if I like, amped up my anxiety? What if I amped up like my that tenseness here? Would I be more aggressive? Would I be more like angry to play? Would that make me better, or is it better to have things nice and calm and focused and be more in that realm. So I've kind of played with those ideas you're talking about myself, and like how I would work it personally, but also how that would apply to a team. And kind of short answer to that, I think that the calm and cool, collected kind of demeanor will is kind of the way to go with things, because when you're able to access that and be in that calm and just be yourself, you're able to switch it on and be aggressive or be more yeah, like raise that arousal if you need to.
Yeah, see. And in terms of, has there been anything measured around the impact of verbal feedback or verbal input into an individual's waves to, I suppose, quantify what would be like a pre-game speech? Like the typical thing is to go in and try and bring up people's level of arousal through shouting and screaming and throwing things around the room.
Right.
Like, is that something that you think would have a measurable change? Would there be a measurable change in the individuals?
I think there would definitely be a measurable change. Whether we would be able to record that, like have them all hooked up while they're they're about to go to the game, or like actually be in that physical setting. I think that the technical pieces of it would be hard to measure, but in a theoretical standpoint, I think it definitely would change somebody's brain waves or how they're operating, that different arousal level they're at, based on what kind of speech or like pregame kind of demeanor is brought into the room, right? If somebody comes in like all fired up and yelling and they're ready to go, like that's gonna raise things up, get people a little bit more activated, versus like, all right, guys, let's keep it cool, let's keep things nice and relaxed. We're gonna go out there, we're gonna win. It's totally different kind of sides of the coin, right?
Yeah, see. And like in the absence of a more kind of objective process, like do you think it's enough for an individual to just be like a good coach, to have just an intuitive sense of these things? Like you hear about the great coaches and they know the right thing to say to each individual. I suppose, yeah, that's where my head goes.
So
like,
like,
is that enough to just have a good understanding of the individuals that you're dealing with? And do you think people can develop a sort of non-verbal, intuitive sense of one another to know where an individual operates best? Or are we like definitely way off the
absolutely.
mark?
Oh no, I think absolutely. I absolutely think that, like, definitely kind of your more like skill positions, maybe somebody who's doing a lot more kicking, like, or just, have to be more aware of like their eyes on the field and where they are in the game, like your nines, your tens, your 15s, those kinds of things. That's going to require a lower arousal level to perform at a better level there, because if you're all stressed and jacked up, you're not going to be able to see the field as well. You're not going to be able to like actually relax into yourself, as opposed to, maybe some of these more forward positions, or somebody who's just a hard hitter and needs to like buckle down and go, and like needs to turn that off actually, and just be that aggressor, be that like physical dominant person. Obviously not too much, because we don't want to get a card, but enough to where we have that right level. So I would definitely say that, like, position bait, I think, with rugby, of course, like your position kind of follows your demeanor a little bit too, kind of like how you like to be, on the field. And I think that a coach could definitely read into those and play to those strengths or those weaknesses very strongly to get the most out of the player.
Yeah, I see. And in terms of like physical stimuli, is that something you see applicability in, say, for example, before they come into a gym session, like to integrate strategies to try and increase arousal level as much as possible for like a maximal strength session? Or I suppose, what do you
Most
see
definitely.
as a fast, like fast input that can be applied in a group setting to bring someone up, or bring a group of individuals up in terms of their arousal level pre-session? Like there would be tactics implemented for that in terms of, again, like your verbal instruction, the conversations you're having with people, like the volume of the music, different kind of energizers. Is that form of input enough, or is there anything that you've seen that is probably a little bit more objective or scientific, a little bit more kind of process driven, that you think would have a more repeatable effect or would be more effective?
I think I think kind of those basic things that you're talking about would change that person's level and make them into that zone that we want them to be in. So, we're getting ready for a big gym session. It's like let's get it going. Let's like get some noise going. Let's get everybody feeling good with each other versus and loud music, things like that too. The banging weights around, obviously that's going to like wake you up and stimulate you a lot more, as opposed to maybe we need to sit down and go through the X's and O's and do a little walkthrough on the board or something like that. We're going to break it down, be a little bit more calmer, have everybody be a little bit more focused and maybe a bit more individualized because they're using that cognitive piece. They're really focused on the thinking process of it, not necessarily what I'm doing with the other people in the room right here physically. So in terms of like a scientific change to that, I'm not saying I could point something out specifically, but definitely things like heat and cold make a big difference too. Something that is a little bit colder is going to like slow things down a bit more, be a little bit more um, cozy, calm, relaxed, if you will. And then things that are more of that, more hot, more heat related, like that's going to make things a little bit more agitated, a little bit faster, increase the speed a bit more with things. But when we talk about water, that's a different thing, right? So like cold water is going to like activate your brain, but kind of freeze things up a bit. That hot water is going to relax you and make you feel a little bit more sleepy, right? Yeah, so little all over the place there, but I think you get what I mean.
And the one of the things that I've like been questioned recently is you see it like in the majority of international sports teams or teams, that rugby teams that have seen playing on an international level, is the everyone into the huddle, the two inhales and a long exhale, or a big inhale and a long exhale.
Yeah,
Is that appropriate practice in terms of if the direction there is decrease arousal?
absolutely.
That's just that's a sensible thing to integrate, because it seems to be more and more kind of common from what I've seen.
I 100% advocate for that. We do that on our team too. We have one, if we get scored on or like if people are just a little too jacked up, we bring it together and it's like, all right, 3 breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. And especially if you can like hold that breath and then let it out nice and slow, that's going to decrease the heart rate and that's going to help just like lower that arousal in a more physiological sense. Drinking water also is going to help lower that heart rate too. So I think like the water up, the breathing, kind of trying to slow things down physically, mentally, and emotionally with that will decrease that arousal level when needed. Obviously, when we're talking fast, when we're getting excited, when we're moving a lot faster, that's going to get things a little bit more amped up, right?
Yes, I see. And in terms of, you said it was the alpha system, you said is the like a affordable one,
Like that,
to
yeah, like the at-home headsets. I
at home
think
headset.
let
Um,
me use.
I
I want
suppose
to make sure
where
I
my
give you
head's
the
going
right
with that,
name of it.
it's like if
Yeah, so there's one called Muse, Muse.
okay,
And that's one of those headsets that it's like one of those at-home kind of neurofeedback systems. And
yeah,
I'm not too familiar with the system because I haven't used it myself, but I believe you can kind of pick which kind of training you want to do, if you want to be in more of an alpha state or if we want to work on theta a little bit, try to work that creativity or something like that, or just calm down that high beta, that anxiety, get that nice and relaxed. I believe you can pick between them. I'm not exactly sure, just because I haven't used it myself, but I've heard that they're pretty good systems and they can be used at home like that as well.
Cool. And in terms of someone using one of these systems at home, how much of a process of like diminishing returns are there? Is it something that you can use multiple times a day and continue to make large improvements? Like, I'm trying to get an idea in my head of what's the end point. Like, does somebody become superhuman and they're so flexible and they can like
Yeah, they're like a monk or something. They can
walk through walls. Like
I would
what's the
equate.
what's
Kind of
like
like
the end point?
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, so that end point with it. So I make this comparison a lot with neurofeedback training. Is it's a lot like strength or conditioning training too. We're training the brain to be more flexible, to be able to be more strength oriented, right? Being able to use that power for that different electrical activity to push through different things. So I would say the overall goal with it is to just create more flexibility and strength within that brain. Like somebody can be, strongest man in the world, right? Those big guys, but maybe they don't have the flexibility. Maybe there's somebody really, really flexible, but they're not very strong. So this kind of works to work at both of those in that way to make it more well-rounded in that way. And yeah, like I always tell people too, like neurofeedback's not going to make you a superhero. Like you're not gonna be able to fly, walk through walls, or telecommunicate, things like that. But it's going to make you more you. Make people feel more themselves, more comfortable with themselves, and not kind of bogged down and caught up with these other mental health aspects like anxiety or depression or any kind of sports performance kind of thing like that. I always say too, it helps you feel what you want to feel when you want to feel it. So you're able to control that arousal level and that, essentially arousal level quite a bit easier.
Yeah. So on like a visceral level, someone would sit down to do some creative work and they just find it easier to get into that creative state.
Absolutely. Yeah. So say somebody's sitting down and is like, okay, I want to come up with some different plays or, like how I'm going to write this speech to the team, like being able to drop into that a little bit easier and access that part of themselves as opposed to, like, oh, I'm just so jacked up right now. I can't calm down. I can't relax. I need to calm down and like do this work, but maybe you're in a different state where you're not able to do that. And this allows you to flex into those different positions quite a bit easier.
I see. Yeah, that's cool. Trying to think if we've got any more questions. It's it's definitely something that a lot of the objectives of what you're talking about are spoken around, but there doesn't seem to be any sort of systematic process from what I've seen anyway. That
on like how to get there,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think there is on like the biofeedback level.
I've heard quite a bit about biofeedback being used with teams as well too, like calming the heart rate or even sweat is like measured sometimes too with that too, and being able to control like how much you're sweating or things like that. But yeah, this just kind of connects it more to that like cognitive, emotional, mind body connection sort of link as opposed to just that physiological perspective of it. And I think, and tell me if I'm wrong in your experience, like the emotional component of it is highly important for an athlete to be able to perform in the way they want to, and especially how they're socially and interpersonally connecting with these other people that they're working with around them in this setting. So like their coach, their physios, their other players, fans even and stuff too. I think it all kind of it's all connected. It all relates.
Yeah, and in terms of that connectivity as well, like in Jersey, I suppose one of the main things that I would have done would have been the strength and conditioning for the individuals in rehab, and a big sort of barrier that we would have had is anxiety around introduction of new movement. Is that something that you feel the neurofeedback would be beneficial in terms of probably being a little bit more open, a bit more approachable to new things?
I believe so. In my experience, people, like all the people I've trained with neurofeedback, that's definitely one of the bonuses they get from it, is like willing to try new things, willing to push themselves a little bit more, willing to try things they, haven't tried yet or experienced, or yeah, I'm saying the same thing, but you get what I mean there.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think so.
And with the actual like biological healing processes, again, like that would be something I've heard around it. It's all connected, and how stress impacts the healing function. Again, is it something you've seen in terms of an improved healing response or adaptation response, reduced inflammation, in terms of a link between someone's neurological signals and what's going on like a cellular tissue?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. I actually have had quite a bit of my clients go through these kinds of things too. Maybe they're have all that tension, they're all tight, they get headaches because they're holding their neck super tight or clenching their jaw or something like that. And being able to calm down that high beta, that fight or flight response, that anxiety, allows their muscles to actually like relax and them to feel a little bit more comfort in their body because they're not so wound up and tight with things. So I would definitely say that it could help on a physiological level too. And um, I'm not sure I can actually say like, oh, it increases recovery, but definitely help you sleep better, which would help with recovery. So inadvertently, all this could help somebody recover or get through that bit of it much easier, in my opinion.
Yeah. And do you think will it reach a level where you'll begin to have like a profile of individuals that are predisposed to success in certain sports, like say for example, like a sprinter
Mm-hmm.
benefits from having this profile? Like how much individual variance is there around what is optimal, in terms of, is it like this guy's a sprinter and this guy's a sprinter, but he is at his best whenever he is really high in this and really low in this, and vice versa? Or is it
Yeah,
is not much room for individual variance?
I think I mean, everyone's an individual, right? And I think individual components play a huge piece into all of that for sure. Maybe I operate in a maybe I operate in beta a little bit better because that's where I feel better myself. Maybe you operate in theta a little bit better because things are more relaxed and that's just where your brain likes to be. So I would definitely say it's definitely an individual basis of things, and also very skill related. So somebody who's like a golfer as opposed to rugby player, let's just say, like they're going to have different benefits to what is going to be more applicable for them because of the skills they're using and what kind of arousal they need to be in to be able to perform that certain skill that they're doing.
Yeah. And on like a, say like an introductory session, if someone were to sit down, is there a profile that can be built for an individual in one session for them to get an indication of, this is sort of my bias, I trend towards this? Or do you see a lot of, like, if I showed up on Monday, I'd be completely different on a Tuesday? Like, do individuals show a lot of consistency over time, or yeah, does that vary day to day? Does it vary hour to hour? Does it vary across weeks and months?
Mm-hmm. So great question with that too. I would say like your different arousal levels, your different brain waves are going to change throughout the day. But for the most part, when I take that recording, that brain map of somebody's brain, that's fairly consistent throughout their week, their life. If they have, like, obviously, if they have something really major go on, something traumatic or emotional, somebody dies or something like that, or they have some kind of major injury or something, especially head injuries, that's going to change a lot of things. But for the most part, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Uh, for the most part, yeah.
Yeah. And with say like a verbal questionnaire, one of the things that I'd seen in a club was a verbal questionnaire for staff to get an indication of personality type, so they can see, I suppose, how to approach different individuals and how to vary their how to vary their feedback, how to vary their challenge to that individual, what that
Hmm.
individual's biases are. Do you think there's a good link between that verbal questionnaire personality profile approach and what you see in terms of objective data in the neurofeedback?
Yeah,
Cool.
definitely. When I read somebody's brain map, I can essentially tell like their personality, what kind of person they are. Like, um, I'll map somebody, and then the next week we'll have the review, and they're like, "Have you been following me around the last week? How do you know how I do things? Because that's
Yeah.
just like what the data says, and that's like what the trends do, and how that brain works." So yeah, it's funny to see, and people are like, "I bet you're the worst friend ever because you're just analyzing people all the time." But I turn it off and on, So
Yeah. So for like for an analysis session or training session with you, like what does that actually look like? Is that them going in and putting like a big headset on? Does it last a long time? Is it pretty quick?
yeah, so I have 50-minute sessions. First 20 minutes is us to kind of chit chat, talk about the goals and how they've been the last couple, like since the last session. If we need to make any changes to the protocol, to the training we're going to do for that day, I prep them through whatever we're going to do. Then we just took up a couple of electrodes. So there is like the whole cap you can put on where it's kind of like a swim cap with different electrodes. But usually I just do like a few at a time, 3 or 4 on the head. They put on the headphones, and then for 30 minutes, they're training while they have a stimulus going, whether they're watching TV or sitting with their eyes closed or listening to music, something kind of like that. So yeah, 30-minute training session. That's about as much as you need for one day. And I usually like to give people like a day of rest in between sessions just to let their brain kind of mellow with it and recover with it a little bit, maybe get back to that baseline that they're usually at. Um, but there's other ways of doing it too, where I've heard other clinics, they go like 3 times a day for like a week and they just kind of like run it through that way. So a lot of variability in how it can work too.
Yeah. Is there a fatigue process to those training sessions? Like do
Oh, I would definitely say so. Yeah. Like, I have some people after they get through a session, they're like, "Oh man, like I'm wiped out. Like I need to go take a nap right now,"
yeah.
because their brain is just so tired from the work that we're doing with it. Again, equating it to that strength and conditioning, it's like we're
Yeah.
working out the brain like a muscle.
Yeah, I see. And in terms of like the stickiness of adaptations, if you've done your training sessions and you've made a change in an individual, is that they've learned that skill and it's ingrained and it doesn't go, or is there like follow-up sessions or top up sessions needed?
So again, comparing it to that strength and conditioning, like you're gonna get pretty strong, right? But if you don't keep it up, you'll lose that strength. So I like people to do maintenance sessions, maybe like once a month after they finish like that treatment plan of 30 to 50 sessions, kind of in that big block, so that 2 to 3 months of time that they're really cranking it. Then once they complete that treatment plan, they come back maybe once a month, maybe once every couple months, just to get a little tune up on the brain, make sure everything's working how we want it to, remind the brain how we want it to behave. And usually they're pretty set from there. So yes, it's permanent, but little tune ups are also very helpful with it too, and keep things in mind.
Yeah, I'd seen that around meditation, and I know from my own kind of practice of meditation as well, like where if I don't do it for a long time, you do sort of feel
It
that,
gets harder.
yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
detraining process. It like with meditation and with like the binaural beats, is there is there dose response? Is it a case of, like you said, training effect where guys would get fatigued after 30 minutes? Like, are there categories of different types of meditation where some will be a little bit more cognitively demanding? Do they train different things? Are you aware of anywhere where it is actually categorized in a meaningful manner? I suppose like my
Not Yeah,
um
like I think there are definitely different types of meditations that can make you go into those different kinds of places, like where you want to focus that mind necessarily. And with the binaural beats for sure, because you're really focusing on that specific brainwave, trying to get into that state, that beta state, that alpha state, whatever, more specifically, as opposed to just a general like, oh, calm or something like that.
Yeah, that's the one thing I found has probably impacted like myself in terms of how consistent I am with it. Is I would like, I suppose, go onto YouTube, type in 20-minute meditation, and it feels a bit like, well, what am I actually trying to do
Am I
here? What's
focusing on, right?
what's the purpose? It just feels like it feels a bit random, I suppose. So yeah, like having some sort of categorization of what the desired effect is would be really helpful. Same with the binaural beats. But yeah, I can
And
see
there's
how an initial process of actually sitting down with yourself and getting an objective profile would point you in a certain direction.
definitely, and that's why I love doing the brain maps for people too, is just being like, oh, like you're in beta most of the time. You don't have any alpha. You're unable to switch into that. You're not able to really calm down and relax. Let's bring up your alpha. Do some meditations to bring up that alpha. Focus on being present and being in that state, as opposed to, you know, being active and alert and trying to always find stimulus or something like that. And in terms of that meditation piece, yeah, like even just doing like a meditation for sleep, meditation for sports performance, meditation for like pre-game or post-game, or a training session I'm about to have come up or something like that. Like, I think you can definitely tailor it, especially just like searching through YouTube. Like, it's so easy to do. You can find things that are specifically tailored for that. I don't know how accurate per se each one is, but I think in a general sense that you would be going in the right direction.
Yeah. See, yeah, fucking hell, that was good. That was detailed. I'm worried of how much of your time I'm taking up on a
Oh no,
Friday.
you're fine. I'm taking up your time on a Friday. No worry about
I'm
me.
in,
We can keep
I'm
going
in
if you
Nottingham,
want,
mate.
or if
It's not
you're, yeah,
um,
like we can keep going with it, or if you wanna wrap things up, totally cool with me too. Either way.
yeah, cool. Happy to keep going. The yeah, again, like that meditation stuff, the Headspace app is something I got access to recently.
Yeah,
And
I'm a
again,
big
flicking
fan
through
of
that.
Headspace. Yeah, they have specific ones for sport too, which is pretty cool. I've used those a couple times as well and found it to be helpful in trying to get into the state I want to be to play in that certain position or that certain way. So I definitely think that is, I'm a big advocate of that for sure.
Yeah, I see. And that that Muse, is that something that you've seen integrated in a sports context before? Like, are there professional sports teams that are working with this kind of hardware?
Not, I don't know about Muse specifically, but I do know there are some other sports teams out there. Like I know the Broncos, the Denver Broncos, the American football team, they've been having some people come in and do some neurofeedback. Probably other professional sports teams too that I may not know about, but like I've said too, there's other American football players that have been doing it. That Italian soccer team did it. Um, Olympic ski team. I'm sure if you Googled like, oh, like top athletes that do neurofeedback or something, there's quite a few of them in there that you may not suspect, like, oh, they actually do this and it's a helpful training regimen for them or something like that.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, just like I'm trying to keep my like S&C head on and see like the applicability in a team setting. Is it something you do where you would visit an environment, go in? Like, how long would it take you to get to go through a squad to do training sessions?
Right. So, that hookup process can be as short as a couple minutes. Them training, we want to do around, 20 to 30 minutes of that time. So really it's like comes down to like money, the finances to be able to support that kind of thing, the time to make sure like we have enough time to train all these 30 different guys. And maybe that's like maybe there's a different schedule throughout the week. Maybe we see these 5 guys on Monday, these 5 guys on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think like doing it all in one day would probably be a lot on the person that's doing it. But I think if there was like a schedule and kind of a way to make it part of like a like, oh, like we got to go hit the gym. Oh, you got to go do your neurofeedback.
Yeah.
Go, go off and do that real quick, or get that accomplished real fast, or something like that. I definitely think it could be something in that kind of way where it's like, oh, go see the physio, oh, go see go get a bath or ice bath or whatever you need to do, and same kind of thing, but we're just working on the brain instead of those specific pieces of the body.
And would the time needed for training sessions decrease over a period of interventions? Like would it start off with 30 minutes and then over time it would be, well, you only need 5 minutes to sort of keep yourself at a level?
I think it's kind of however much you want to do it. Like
Yeah.
same kind of thing with like doing like ice for an injury or something there. Like maybe in the beginning we need to start really long, do that full 30 minutes, maybe even push it to like 40. And then maybe later on, oh, I only have 15 minutes. Let's just like get it in and get a little bit as much as I can. Okay, we'll hook it up, we'll get it done. That's still going to be beneficial to you as opposed to not doing it at all.
Yeah, I see. I see. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other questions around the applicability.
For sure.
I think that's me. My head is absolutely spinning. I need some
I know it's
neurofeedback.
like a lot of it. It's a lot of information. So I appreciate your time so much. And I'm looking through my questions if I have any more here too. Um, yeah, I guess like just, not to take up too much of your time either, but do you see that there's like a benefit or like a niche that this could be helpful or applicable to people, especially with that like mental health kind of emotional component to things, with these different athletes on this like higher level?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's something that I suppose it is a common thing that is said is like once individuals reach like a very high level of proficiency, that whole quote of like it's all between the ears. Again, like I haven't worked at the pinnacles of elite sport, so I can't speak to whether that's true or not. But yeah,
I
like
mean, for me, like being in that level you're at with Jersey and stuff, that's up there for my thoughts on like rugby. I know it's not like, national tier or anything, but that's still like really awesome. And I think that's really cool that you got to travel around and see these different clubs and how they operate, and be able to like synthesize all that information too. I'm just I saw your article and I was like, man, this guy's awesome. So just wanted to say that too.
yeah, I think like it's something that we would discuss in the office, and like you are speaking around where's this guy's head at? Is he mentally in the right position? And again, like none of us have any training in psychology, neurology. We're speaking about it, people from the background of kind of coaching, and oftentimes not a formal education in coaching science. So like there is a lot of sort of debate without necessarily like a strong foundation for that to be kind of based on. So I think having having an objective format for that, I personally would find helpful, and I suppose being able to outsource those questions and have a bit of expert input into where guys are at different levels of, again, like mental health, mental arousal. I think it would benefit me. It's not something like I think we would be able to afford in terms of Jersey anyway. Again, but like as you
Right.
go up, like, there becomes more and more money available naturally.
Mhm.
But yeah, like the mental health one again is something that would have been raised in our environment, and like us as a coaching team, like we're so far off experts in that area, so we would have to outsource to individuals outside the organization with that topic. Is that something that you guys are qualified to give input on? Like, yeah, do you have to be um, a certain type of doctor? Like, where's the line in terms of, like, we wouldn't be able to give guys input on their mental health because we're probably putting ourselves in a tricky position then?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know how it would relate like internationally if there's like laws around that or like certifications that are needed with things specifically. But in terms of just somebody off the bat doing neurofeedback for somebody, I think they could give their opinions on like somebody's mental state, somebody's like um mental arousal, like you're saying, but necessarily making a diagnosis of somebody like, oh, this person has depression, or like this person has anxiety or something like that. um some neurofeedback clinicians do that. They make those diagnoses. I typically try to stay away from that just because that's a bit of labeling that I don't think is necessary. um so I think it depends on the level of credentialing that the individual has. If they're more like a neuro they're more of a neurologist, more have that like doctorate degree of things, I think that comes a little bit more, they have a little bit more freedom to make those judgments or make those big claims, as opposed to somebody a little bit more like myself, which I just like, I'm a therapist. I can make those opinions and make those suggestions, but I'm not going to say, oh, this person shouldn't play because
Yeah,
they have anxiety or something like that. I would never do something in that kind of sense. But it's a kooky field, so I could see some people who would.
yeah. I think, like, it's interesting to see the balance of different clubs, different environments, like different coaching teams, and who's probably a little bit more open-minded, who's not necessarily that open-minded. And there can be a sense of fear of, I suppose, external people coming in my opinion, particularly in the psychological sense
I
around
absolutely understand that. Yeah.
individuals. Yeah. I think, like, for the most part, coaches want to have some level of input in terms of arousal level, and uh, that would be reflected in, to me anyway, the way that days are structured around, uh, and how verbal feedback is structured, where some meetings you're trying to bring lads up, some you're trying to bring them down. So again, I think
Hmm.
if you were to come into an environment and had a good level of integration with a coaching team, and I suppose everyone was on the same page around objectives, I think it would be beneficial. I think where it could be problematic is if um, you're trying to
People are butting
bring
heads. Yeah.
and they're trying to bring someone up. Um,
I
but yeah,
I completely agree with you, and I think that if somebody was to step into this role as like somebody being that, you know sports psych, or like just like somebody doing neurofeedback for a team or something, they would have to be on the like same page as the coach, or same page as the players, at least like have that culture determined, have those goals kind of set in mind. Like if you're having people fight each other, especially staff, like, you know things are just going to fall apart. People are going to eat each other as opposed
yeah.
to working together and building up, right?
And I think where you spoke around, a big objective of it is to bring in individuals to an optimal state to perform in each session. I think that's like really beneficial because it places an emphasis on, let's get the most out of every single one of these interventions, as opposed to something that probably is a little bit more removed and external, where you aren't quite sure whether it's tied into what the overall objective is in terms of a performance plan and a performance structure. So yeah, I definitely think it has a place.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool.
I'd be interested to see who picks it up first in terms of rugby. It's
Yeah,
yeah, it's a
I
bit
I mean, I bet it would be England, but that's just me thinking. But I mean, you've been to Japan too. I imagine they're pretty regimented with those kinds of things, and um, just like that process-oriented kind of mentality.
yeah, yeah. I think it'll be someone, it'll be someone with, again, an open-minded group that is willing to, I suppose, go outside what is typically the norm. But yeah, really interested to see where it goes in terms of adding a structure, and it's something that in Jersey I wish we had a little bit more of. In terms of the interventions that I brought in around like the non-sleep deep rest and stuff, for me to have a more comprehensive understanding of, is this actually beneficial, or is it just in the schedule because I heard someone say that it's good, type of thing. Yeah, so I'm interested to see where it goes. And yeah, keen to stay in touch around what you guys are up to, and how much you're doing in the world of sport, and if you see any kind of further applicability there. And yeah, if you hear of any teams doing it and you can give me an insight or a tip, then absolutely, like, more than keen to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's definitely stay connected on things, and I'd love to maybe chat again sometime if we have some new developments or anything that we want to just touch on again. Just a great connection to have. I'm really glad I got to get on this call with you and to have this conversation.
Yeah, of course. Even like on a personal level, it's something I'm interested to try myself. As I say, like, it's like, I've tried bits and pieces of meditation, and my frustration lies in, what am I doing this for, kind of thing. In that, like, I hear a lot around like meditation's beneficial, and I feel whenever, like, I have done it consistently, it has been beneficial, but just around choosing the actual intervention that I'm having, it just feels like there's a lot of choice now. And like, even you go on the Headspace and it's like, right, well, what am I doing?
Like
How
30
long?
different, like, yeah.
Like, do I need to do it for 5 minutes a day? Do I need to do it for 30 minutes a day? Do I use a sleep meditation? Do I use a morning meditation? Yeah, it's I don't know whether that's me just overthinking it, and again, something's better than nothing. But yeah, if I could get a direction to it and a structure to it, it would suit my brain anyway. You probably know
I totally
exactly
get
what
that.
personality type I am.
Well, just hearing you kind of talk a bit, I was like, okay, I think I know what he's got going. Yeah, like everything I tell people with meditation is just like, start slow, start easy, and then just build up as you go, right? Like, kind of like if you're trying to build strength, right? You're like, I want to be strong, I want to lift the heaviest thing I can lift at a comfortable, within comfort. So just try to like extend and lengthen that as you see fit. And I would say, like, whichever meditation you're specifically doing, any one of them is going to be helpful. You're trying to be present in that mindful moment. You're increasing those alpha waves, which is just going to increase your flexibility with all those brain waves anyway. So I think it'd be, any meditation is helpful with it.
Cool. I'll get back on it. I'll start back in.
Yeah, I mean, I've been bad on it too. I need to get back on it. So yeah, I get that.
Nice. Well, it was good to meet you, mate. Thanks very much for reaching out. Fucking, like, very, very glad we made the connection, and as I say, keen to chat again.
Absolutely.
And learn a bit more, because it's definitely interesting. Like, and definitely something I think is applicable, like, in terms of high performance sport. So thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, thank you. No problem at all. And yeah, like I said, I recorded this, so maybe I'll chop it up and use a bit for social media and things like that. And if you'd like me to send it to you too, I don't mind at all.
Yeah, of course, mate. Stick the full thing up online. See if people want to have a listen, because like there's stuff there that, like, in terms of other S+Cs, like, it's things I've spoken to other S+Cs about, and it's not something that any of us have been able to provide an answer on. So, and that's not just S+Cs, it's coaches as well. Like, I think it's a question that a lot of people are asking. So I think people would be very excited to hear what you have to say.
Right on. Very cool.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll chat soon. Okay.
Thanks, man. You too. All right. All the best, Paul.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.